What was that?
Control, we've got a code red in the Orca pool. Trainer's down. Marisol's got her leg.
Get the alarms! Get the main team now! She's not breaking free! I'm trying to pull! Isa, grab it! Don't let go! She's dragging me under.
Emergency protocol in effect. All non-essential staff evacuate immediately. Medical team to the performance pool.
She's not surfacing! Oh God, she's not coming up!
In the heart of Miami, Florida, beyond the sun-bleached streets and the hum of traffic, sits a marine park that has become a controversial landmark. Behind its gates, in a shallow pool of concrete painted blue, lives a single female orca, once the star of a generation, now the most isolated whale in North America. For over 40 years, she has circled the same small tank, a tank no bigger than a backyard swimming pool when compared to the open ocean she was born to roam. Her name is Marisol, though to the paying crowds she was long marketed under a stage name, the face of countless tourist brochures. Her story began in 1970 during what eyewitnesses still recall as a violent capture in the Pacific Northwest. That day turned the sea red. 5 orcas drowned in the chaos, including 4 calves, while helicopters and boats herded the survivors into nets. Marisol was taken alive and sold for $20,000, a figure that sealed her fate and turned her from a wild hunter into an attraction. For nearly 5 decades, she leapt and spun on command, lifting trainers above the water to the roar of stadium applause. She flipped her body through hoops, slapped her tail on the surface, and performed the same routine day after day until this spring when the Miami Seaquarium finally announced her retirement. The stadium grew quiet, but the debate surrounding her future only grew louder. Indigenous leaders, animal rights advocates, and philanthropists had campaigned for years to send her home. Now, for the first time, executives of the Dolphin Company, owners of the Seaquarium, declared themselves 100% committed to returning the 56-year-old whale to the waters of her birth. It's the right moment where we sit down and join forces, CEO Eduardo Albert told reporters, igniting cautious hope. Yet her story is not without scars. In 1980, her companion Hugo repeatedly rammed his head against the tank's acrylic walls until he collapsed and died, leaving Marisol alone. In recent years, her body has weakened. Respiratory infection, ongoing medications, constant veterinary oversight. Still, experts marvel at her endurance. She's a miracle every day, said Howard Garrett, a veteran whale researcher. Against all odds, she's still alive. But an event shattered the chance to rescue Marisol. The waters of Penn Cove in Washington state churned with panic the day Ocean Wave Enterprises arrived. Their fleet cut through the bay with military precision diesel fumes, mixing with the salt air as helicopters roared overhead. Nets stretched like steel curtains, tightening around a pod of southern resident orcas that had hunted those salmon-rich waters for generations. Mothers slammed against the mesh calves, bleated high-pitched calls that carried across the shoreline. The water foamed as massive tails pounded in terror. Witnesses later swore the sound was like thunder rolling through the cove. Ocean Wave crews shouted into radios, forcing the animals into tighter corners. Some whales dove beneath the barriers, only to become tangled in nylon webbing. 4 calves never surfaced again, their bodies trapped and dragged down until the sea grew still. A 5th drowned in the struggle, pulled under in silence while the rest of the pod shrieked. Above the chaos, a single calf was roped and dragged away. Marisol, thrashing violently as winches lifted her toward the deck of a waiting barge. The operation was brutal but efficient. Within hours, she was on shore, loaded onto a truck, and driven to a holding pen. At the time, there was no Marine Mammal Protection Act, no Endangered Species Act, no federal shield against such captures. Ocean Wave's contracts thrived in that vacuum. Their business was simple: harvest the ocean's largest creatures, then sell them to aquariums and marine parks hungry for profit. Records later showed Marisol was sold for $20,000, a price tag that erased her pod, her freedom, and her lineage in one stroke. When U.S. laws finally caught up the Marine Mammal Protection Act in 1972 and the Endangered Species Act in 1973, Ocean Wave had already cashed in. The company denied wrongdoing, insisting they operated legally under the standards of the time, but locals who watched the capture called it something else: theft in broad daylight. Marisol the calf, torn from her family that day, would be flown to Miami, where concrete tanks and show lights would replace the boundless waters of the Pacific Northwest. Her new life would be measured in tricks, applause, and survival. Ocean Wave Marine Park opened its gates in 1984, modeled to rival the largest aquariums in America. Spanning nearly 30 acres on the edge of Miami's coast, the park boasted more than 200 exhibits and claimed a collection of 35,000 animals from over 600 species. Visitors marveled at tropical fish tanks glowing with artificial coral reefs, towering aviaries alive with the chatter of exotic birds, and glass tunnels where sharks glided silently overhead. But the true centerpiece of Ocean Wave was its massive performance pool, an engineering feat of 1.5 million gallons of filtered seawater, framed with towering rock facades and multi-level viewing windows. Promoted as a stage of the sea, it gave the illusion of depth and wilderness. Yet beneath the glossy brochures, cracks were already forming. Unlike the Monterey Bay Aquarium, which emphasized conservation and kept its mission rooted in education, Ocean Wave built its reputation on theatrical spectacle. Orca performances were its crown jewel, and from the start, critics warned that the size of the pool compared to the scale of the open ocean was nothing short of confinement. Those concerns only grew louder after the release of the 2013 documentary Blackfish, which sparked global outrage over captivity practices. By 2016, protests had erupted outside Ocean Wave's gates. Demonstrators waved signs reading, "A bathtub is not an ocean, and no more breeding for profit." Animal welfare groups decried the tank's cramped quarters and the risks of continuing captive breeding programs. Chants of "Free the whales" echoed against the park's concrete walls. Management responded with reforms-enriched environments, educational panels, and gradual phasing out of certain show elements. But incidents continued to surface. Trainers were injured, orcas showed erratic behavior, and the uneasy balance between entertainment and animal welfare remained fraught. Still, Ocean Wave thrived financially. With 500 employees, annual revenues of $50 million, and a steady stream of tourists, it marketed itself as both family attraction and research hub. Critics, however, argued that the bottom line dictated every decision. "It's a spectacle dressed up as science," one columnist wrote. And at the heart of that spectacle stood Isabel Cortez, a trainer whose rise embodied both the promise and peril of life inside Ocean Wave. Born on April 15, 1995 in Santa Cruz, just north of Monterey, Isabel's life was steeped in salt air and tide charts. Her father was a commercial fisherman who spent dawns hauling nets from the Pacific, his clothes always smelling faintly of diesel and fresh catch. Her mother was a marine biologist at the Monterey Bay Aquarium, logging endless hours cataloging kelp forests and rescuing stranded sea otters. For Isabel, childhood weekends meant tide pool explorations, where she snorkeled among sea stars and anemones, her small hands tracing the delicate tentacles that curled at her touch. By age 5, she was already writing stories about dolphins in spiral-bound notebooks. One journal entry saved by her mother read, "The ocean is alive, and it speaks to those who listen." School came easily to her. Straight A's filled her report cards, and teachers described her as both meticulous and imaginative. At the University of California, Santa Barbara, she pursued marine biology with a focus on animal communication. Her senior thesis, analyzing the vocal repertoires of captive dolphins, was praised for blending statistical rigor with compassion. Graduating summa cum laude in 2017, Isabel left professors calling her a rare bridge between science and empathy. One advisor told a colleague, "She doesn't just study animals, she connects with them." After graduation, she chased hands-on experience. In Hawaii, she interned at a dolphin rehabilitation center, learning the delicate timing of positive reinforcement training. She carried buckets of herring marked behaviors with whistles and practiced patience with animals recovering from injuries. By 2018, at just 23, she joined Ocean Wave as a junior trainer. Within months, her dedication and composure in high-pressure situations made her stand out. She advanced quickly, building a reputation for calm authority around unpredictable animals. By 2022, Isabel was head trainer, overseeing a 5-person team and designing behavioral programs. Colleagues often marveled at her presence. "She's like a whisperer," her assistant Mia Ramos said. "She can walk into a storm and the orca just settles." Off-duty, Isabel's life was no less full. She surfed the breaks near Santa Cruz, almost daily volunteered at a sea turtle rescue center, and ran a blog called Waves of Wonder, which drew over 10,000 readers. There she shared conservation tips, training insights, and photo essays of life behind the glass. She dreamed openly of creating a sanctuary for retired captive animals, telling reporters in 2023, "These orcas are family to me. They deserve more than concrete walls." Yet those closest to her worried. Friends noted her long hours, 60-hour work weeks that often stretch past midnight. She carries the weight of every animal like it's her own, one colleague confided. Her intensity focused especially on one orca, Marisol. Captured as a calf in 2012 from Icelandic waters, Marisol had developed a troubling history. In 2021, she lunged at a trainer mid-show, forcing emergency protocols. In 2023, she stopped responding to cues, entirely isolating himself in a corner of the pool. To management, Marisol was dangerous. To Isabel, she was misunderstood. She poured energy into enrichment activities, puzzle feeders, varied vocal exercises, new hand signals, determined to rebuild trust. "He isn't malicious," she told Mia one night, leaning over pool logs. "He just needs someone to believe in him." Her family described her as relentlessly optimistic, her laughter carrying through every gathering. But devotion has its risks. No one imagined that her fierce belief in Marisol's redemption would lead her toward tragedy. On June 12, 2024, the day broke crisp and clear over Monterey Bay. The horizon glowed in streaks of peach and gold as a Pacific breeze funneled through cypress trees and gulls wheeled above the surf. Isabel stirred awake at 5:15 a.m. in her one-bedroom apartment overlooking the water. Beside her bed stood a framed photo herself and Marisol from 2 years earlier, captured mid-performance, her massive head lifted above the surface beside her outstretched hand. She stretched, whispered, "Today's the day we turn things around," and padded into the kitchen. Coffee brewed strong, laced with cinnamon, as she reviewed her notes on enrichment strategies. She scribbled ideas into the margins: floating puzzle feeder, hidden scent trail, target sticks with sound cues. Unknown to her, the aquarium's overnight log recorded unsettling details Marisol had been vocalizing at length, deep rumbling calls that later analysts identified as signs of distress. By 6:30 a.m., Isabel was on her morning jog along the Monterey Coastal Trail. The path wound past fishing docks and breakers, where sea lions barked from the rocks. She waved to fishermen readying their boats and nodded at tourists taking sunrise photos. "The ocean recharges me," she often said, and that morning she felt its rhythm in every stride. Returning home, she showered, pulled on her Ocean Wave uniform, a blue polo embroidered with the Wave logo, khaki shorts, and prepared breakfast. Yogurt berries, a granola bar. She ate while scrolling through her blog comments. One follower had written, "Your work with Marisol inspires me." She typed back quickly, smiling, "He's teaching me as much as I'm teaching him." The reply glowed on her screen, a quiet moment of optimism before a day that would turn dark. Outside her window, the first rays of sun painted the bay in soft pinks, but at Ocean Wave, deeper currents were already shifting. Marisol's overnight vocalizations had been logged, her restless pacing recorded on cameras, small warnings that would go unheeded. Isabel closed her laptop, grabbed her keys, and set out for the aquarium, unaware that by nightfall her faith in Marisol and her life itself would be tested in ways no training could prepare her for. That evening, as the last guests filtered out and the stadium lights dimmed, Ocean Wave's Orca Arena transformed into a silent stage. The stands stood empty, rows of blue plastic seats gleaming under the glow of security lamps. The surface of the million-gallon pool shimmered like glass, reflecting the steel beams above. Overhead vents hummed softly, pumping warm, chlorinated air into the cavernous space. Every sound carried the drip of water from the rock facade, the occasional metallic clang from a maintenance worker finishing up outside the muffled footsteps of the skeleton crew patrolling the grounds. In that hollow quiet, the pool became an echo chamber, its stillness deceptive. From below, Marisol's shadow traced wide circles, her dorsal fin cutting through the blue depths like a blade. Her movements were erratic, sometimes slow and deliberate, then suddenly sharp and fast, sending ripples skittering across the surface. To Isabel, who stood at the edge in her wetsuit whistle dangling from her neck, this was familiar, a challenge, but one she believed she could meet. "All right, Marisol," she murmured, her voice carrying across the water. "Just you and me tonight." She clutched her training bucket, the smell of herring heavy in the humid air, and stepped onto the submerged platform. Above, a lone security guard lingered on the observation deck, leaning on the rail, unaware she was about to witness a performance unlike any in Ocean Wave's history. Not a show of trust, but of raw, untamed power, breaking free. At 8 o'clock, Sharp Isabel Cortez arrived at Ocean Wave, the morning heat already shimmering across the asphalt parking lot. Staff streamed in uniforms, crisp radios clipped to their belts. She clocked in her ID card, beeping against the reader, then slipped into the trainer's lounge. The aroma of fresh coffee and faint chlorine clung to the air. Mia Ramos sat at the counter, stirring her cup, eyes tired. Marisol was restless last night. She muttered concern etched in her tone. Isabel leaned casually against the counter, sipping. Isolation's rough on him, she answered. I'll work with him tonight alone, no distractions. Mia frowned. Be careful, Isa. Remember what happened with Tick on Isabel? Gave a quick laugh, brushing it aside. Marisol knows me. We've got a bond. Neither knew that her agitation ran deeper. A tank transfer days earlier had disrupted her routine, layering stress on top of years of confinement. The morning passed with routine rhythms. From 9 to noon, Isabel led dolphin sessions in front of cheering crowds, orchestrating flips, waves, and synchronized leaps that drew gasps of delight. Children pressed hands against the glass, parents snapped photos. The stadium echoed with applause, but Isabel's focus wandered to Marisol, whose log she planned to review later. Lunch came quickly, a salad shared with Dr. Elena Ruiz, the vet tech. Her cortisol levels are high, Elena warned, flipping open a chart. That's chronic stress, Isa. Isabel nodded, chewing slowly, already sketching out calming drills she hoped to try. Afternoon hours dissolved into paperwork, training logs, behavior summaries, and a staff meeting about safety protocols. Ironically, the focus was crystal clear: never under any circumstance enter a pool alone with an aggressive animal. Isabel listened quietly, then requested an exemption for her evening session. She argued her expertise, her history with Marisol, her confidence. It was granted reluctantly. Later, a colleague would shake their head and say, that was the last rule she ever bent. By 6 p.m., the park emptied, the energy fading into silence. Families streamed out with souvenirs, leaving only a skeleton crew. 2 security guards pacing the perimeter, a maintenance worker adjusting lights, and Elena stationed on call. Isabel lingered, reviewing hours of footage of Marisol's past behaviors. She studied the way her dorsal fin cut the surface, how his pace quickened when agitated. At 8, she pulled on her neoprene wetsuit, the snug fabric sealing against her skin. Inside the Orca house, the air hung heavy, humid from recycled water. The performance pool glowed turquoise under overhead lamps. Marisol surfaced briefly, her eyes turning toward her through thick glass. Hey, buddy, she called softly, tossing him a fish. She accepted, but her movements jerked, abrupt and sharp. Unseen security monitors captured her circling tight, restless loops that trainers worldwide recognize as precursors to aggression. By 9:30, the building was silent, but for the steady hum of pumps. Isabel entered the pool deck with a whistle around her neck and a bucket of herring at her side. She waded onto the submerged platform water, lapping at her thighs. She clapped 3 times, cueing the start. Marisol Rose gave a small wave with her pectoral fin. Encouraged, she rewarded him and signaled for a leap. She obliged, breaching with force water raining in silver sheets. Good boy, she praised, tossing another fish. Then the shift came. Her pace accelerated, dorsal fins slicing sharp arcs, circles tightening. Waves slapped against her legs, destabilizing her footing. Easy there, she called, extending a flat palm. From the observation deck above, Elena leaned over the rail, a knot forming in her stomach. That doesn't look right, she whispered to the guard beside her. She nodded, uneasy. The circling stopped. Marisol dove, vanishing into the 35-foot depths, the surface smooth to glass. Isabel leaned forward, scanning the blue void. A low rumble vibrated upward, a sound like thunder trapped underwater. Marisol, come on up, she coaxed, clapping her hands. He struck without warning. From the depths, she erupted like a torpedo, jaws open, teeth flashing. The impact was bone-shattering as her mouth clamped onto her leg just above the knee. Pain seared like fire. Ah, no, Marisol, release, she screamed, voice torn raw. She yanked with brutal force, dragging her from the platform into the cold pool. Water engulfed her, bubbles exploding around her head. Marisol thrashed her body with a wall of muscle, whipping her side to side. Blood burst into the water, swirling in crimson clouds. Isabel broke the surface for a gasp, shrieking, "Help, get help," before being pulled under again. Alarms blared as Elena smashed the emergency button. The guard's voice crackled over the radio. Trainer in the water, Marisol's got her underwater sound muffled to a roar. Isabel pummeled her snout with her free leg. but the 12,000-pound body overpowered every kick. She released her momentarily, then snapped onto her arm, teeth-piercing, neoprene-slicing skin. Agony flared. She surfaced, coughing, choking. "Please stop, Marisol, it's me!" Her eyes bulged with terror as she rammed her into the concrete wall. A dull crack echoed, her ribs breaking. Blood streamed, painting the pool pink. On deck, the maintenance worker lunged with a long rescue pole. "Grab it, Isa," she yelled, thrusting it out. She reached fingertips, brushing metal, but Marisol dove, dragging her down. Pinned at the bottom, her lungs screamed. For 47 seconds, she fought, bubbles bursting from her lips in frantic bursts. Her chest convulsed, vision blurring. She clawed upward, barely breaking the surface once more, whispering, "Help me," before another thrash slammed her skull against concrete. Bones fractured, spine ribs, limbs, sickening thuds reverberating through the water. Emergency crews scrambled, trainers tossing fish-banging gates, shouting commands. Marisol ignored every lure locked in her assault. The pool, once the stage of ocean waves' pride, had become a blood-stained battlefield, and Isabel Cortez was caught in its center. Here's the rewritten ending sequence expanded in cinematic, with Sophia Kendall replaced by Isabel Cortez and Kale replaced by Marisol. I kept all events intact, but enriched details, staff reactions, aftermath, and societal impact. Word count of 600, longer than your 1/300 original, Kim. The attack stretched into agony. 90 seconds of raw violence felt like a lifetime to those watching. Isabel's screams fractured into garbled cries as water filled her lungs, her thrashing weakening with every second. Shock overtook her body, muscles failing, hands slipping from the rescue pole that hovered just beyond reach. Blood spread in clouds around her, thick and crimson under the stadium lights. Finally, after nearly 2 minutes, her body went limp. She drifted suspended in the red-stained water wetsuit, shredded limbs hanging loosely. Marisol released her, retreating to the far side of the pool. The great orca surfaced, blowing a deep exhale that echoed like a cannon across the cavern. Her breaths were heavy, her dark eye turning briefly toward the floating body of the trainer she had known for years. Some said the look suggested regret, others instinct, but in that moment the line blurred. The pool grew still, except for the ripples fanning outward from Isabel's drifting form. "Oh God, she's not moving," Elena screamed, tears spilling as she tore off her shoes and dove in. Security alarms shrieked overhead. Paramedics rushed onto the deck with crash bags and defibrillators, but the sight froze them. Isabel's body was hauled from the water at 10:02 p.m., laid flat against the cold deck. Her wetsuit was shredded, arms and legs torn open, her torso, a patchwork of bruises and bite marks. The metallic scent of blood clung to the chlorine-heavy air. Medics worked quickly, compressions, airways monitors, but after minutes of silence, the verdict was given. Time of death confirmed, caused multiple blunt force injuries, drowning, and catastrophic blood loss. The aquarium locked down immediately. The staff stood pale and shaking. Elena collapsed onto the tiles, sobbing uncontrollably. One guard leaned against the wall, vomiting from shock. Within the hour, managers placed calls to executives, and by midnight, Monterey police and OSHA officials filled the building. Yellow tape cordoned off the arena, cameras rolled as investigators collected evidence. Every moment of the attack had been captured on security footage. At 1 a.m., a call reached Isabel's family. In their home north of Monterey, her mother Ellen answered. The words struck like glass shattering. "Not my baby," she screamed, collapsing into her husband Jack's arms. He drove through the night headlights, cutting across coastal highways, silent except for the sound of his wife sobbing. Days later, siblings arrived. They huddled close, grief rolling through the household. Ellen told reporters through tears, she lived for those animals, and now one has taken her. Friends organized candlelit vigils on the beach, the Pacific wind tugging at flames as hundreds gathered. They shared stories of Isabel rescuing stranded crabs, fighting plastic pollution, and laughing so loudly it carried across tide pools. Photos of her with dolphins and turtles glowed in the candlelight. The message was clear: her compassion had touched lives far beyond the aquarium walls. Authorities moved swiftly. The California Division of Occupational Safety and Health fined Ocean Wave $250,000 for violations. Inadequate barriers, lack of enforced safety protocols, and allowing solo sessions with high-risk animals. Federal investigators uncovered deeper issues: outdated tanks, exhausted staff, ignored warning signs, all echoing the controversies that had followed Blackfish years earlier. Animal rights groups seized the moment. PETA rallied outside Ocean Wave's gates with thousands chanting, "Free the Orcas." Protesters carried signs with Isabel's photo, her name now a symbol of captivity's cost. Her death is a wake-up call, one activist declared into a megaphone. The story exploded worldwide. CNN, BBC, and every major outlet ran headlines. Trainer killed by orca, captivity's deadly cost. Social media surged with the hashtag #Justice for Isabel. Her blog, Waves of Wonder, ballooned from 10,000 readers to over 100,000, repurposed by followers into a living memorial. Debate ignited over Marisol's fate. Some demanded euthanasia, calling her a danger. Public backlash swelled against the idea. Experts urged relocation to a coastal sea pen sanctuary, though costs soared past $5 million and logistics dragged on. Instead, Marisol was isolated permanently. Her pool reinforced her shows ended. Ocean Wave faced a reckoning. Executives announced sweeping reforms where orca exhibits would be phased out by 2027, breeding programs halted, and new investments made in virtual reality experiences. Lawsuits followed. Isabel's family sued for negligence, settling for $10 million. The funds established the Isabel Cortez Marine Conservation Fund, aimed at protecting marine life and supporting students in the field she loved. Broader ripples reached far. California lawmakers introduced a bill to ban all cetacean captivity. By 2025, it passed, hailed as a landmark in animal rights legislation. Aquarium attendance dropped 30% nationwide, while wild whale watching tours surged. Public opinion shifted. The ocean, not concrete pools, became the preferred stage for orcas. Years later, Isabel's legacy endured. The Sea Turtle Rescue Center, where she volunteered, flourished under her name. Scholarships in her honor sent young biologists into the field. Documentaries retold her story, sparking global conversations about captivity ethics and the risks trainers bore in the name of spectacle. And yet, for those who knew her personally, the pain lingered like salt on the tongue. She trusted too much, Mia reflected softly, standing at the edge of the empty pool 1 year later. That was her gift, and what cost her everything. Isabel Cortez's death reverberated far beyond the walls of Ocean Wave. What began as a single tragedy rippled outward into sweeping change. Legislators, pressured by outraged citizens, moved quickly to strengthen protections. By 2025, California passed a historic ban on cetacean captivity, effectively ending the era of performing orcas in the state. Other regions followed, shifting investment towards sanctuaries and coastal rehabilitation centers. Public taste changed too. Attendance at marine parks dropped sharply while wild whale watching tours flourished, giving families a chance to see these giants where they belonged, in the open sea. Ocean Wave itself became a symbol of transition. By 2027, its orca program was shuttered, its once famed performance pool drained and converted into an immersive virtual reality theater. Screens replaced splash zones, and children learned about orcas not through stunts, but through documentaries that revealed their migration routes, communication calls, and family bonds. What had been spectacle was recast as education, and Isabel's story was cited as the turning point. Her name endured in classrooms, scholarships, and research grants. The Isabel Cortez Marine Conservation Fund helped young scientists launch careers, while her old blog, Waves of Wonder, lived on as an online memorial, as entries shared by conservation groups worldwide. Along coastal towns, vigils still flickered each year on June 12th, lanterns drifting across the surf in her memory. Yet even as laws changed and sanctuaries grew, a hard truth remained. Trainers, activists, and lawmakers could write policies, build enclosures, and argue ethics, but no one could rewrite the forces that ruled beneath the water's surface. Orcas were not villains, nor were they stage props. They were predators forged by the wild. Isabel's death, as brutal as it was, underscored the tension between human ambition and natural power. In the end, her legacy was not just about ending captivity, but about reminding the world of a lesson too often forgotten: we can study, respect, and admire, but we cannot control animal instincts.